Hey, welcome to 3D Studio Max Game Pipeline Mastery course. Um, I'm gonna try to show as best as I can a way to make some really simple starter assets from Max, and while I do that, I'm gonna try to teach a lot of the 3D Max basics. So it's not just how to make a cool asset and put it in a game type of thing. It's also like a crash course on 3D Studio Max. So I guess first things first, this is your default view right here. Very straightforward. Top view, front view, left view, perspective. I turn off a lot of the fancier, newer things like there's like a view cube and some steering wheel or some of those things. I turn those off. Those are like kind of new school to me, so like I never used any of that, so I just turn it off. I think just the view cube, if it's annoying to you, you can just go here. Let me just do that again. So you can click on any of these viewport um, crosshair thingies here, and that gives you like some configure viewport options. And there's a view cube tab, and I just hide it. I don't like it. So I mean, if you guys want to use it, that's cool. I'm not gonna use it, so I just hide it, and that's it. Another thing that I do that is like essential to me is setting up my buttons here. So let me just go over these tabs right here. These are your utility tabs, or these tabs have a lot of different options, starting from this one with like the sun or the star. It's a create tab. So like this is where you go to create any kind of new object. And I'm gonna work on the perspective view for the most part. So I'm just gonna maximize this and not worry about these other ones. And the way to maximize the window that you want is you click on it, you select it, and then you press this button all the way down here. And as you can see, when you put your mouse over it, it says maximize viewport toggle. So I'm just gonna hit that, and now my full the full screen is just the perspective window. Um, I don't know if you guys are already familiar with the navigation in 3D Max with the mouse and stuff. Um, I use a mouse and the keyboard for the most part. You can use some of these buttons down here. Again, these bottom right, these bottom right buttons pretty much do the navigation for you. You could pretty much navigate with just the buttons, but that becomes really cumbersome after a while. Like it's better to just use the mouse shortcuts and the keyboard. So I guess I should explain what the buttons do first. So I think one of the main ones would be the orbit subobject. And as you can see, like when I press it, this ring comes up. And if you like click in the middle of the ring, you'll see that the cursor changes to this um, like atom symbol or something. You know, like it has like arrows that go 360 up and down. And when I press on the viewport with it, it literally just does that. It it like orbits, you know, just the viewport itself. But you can also like if I go over these other points, you'll see that they also do the same thing, but like I guess on the one axis. So like I'm doing it here on the right one, and it's orbiting on just that axis, and if I do it on the top ones, it's orbiting on that. But I don't like doing that so much with the with that tool. So what I usually do is, like, the best way to do this is you press Alt and the middle mouse button, and it pretty much does the same thing. So like you can just be working and press Alt, middle mouse button, and you'll be orbiting around whatever you have selected. That's usually the best option. If that's not default, I would recommend setting it up now. Again, go back to this button right here and make sure that your option is this bottom one right here that looks like a circle with like a tiny slice of green. Not the one that's full white or the one that's full green, the one that has like white and green. So then you'll, like if I make an object here, like a sphere, for example, when I orbit around it, it orbits around the object that I have selected. But anyway, Alt middle mouse button does that for you. And also, the other essential one is just middle mouse button pans whatever you're seeing. I mean, it pans the viewport really. So that's very, very useful as well. And quite intuitive as well is the mouse wheel zooms in and zooms out. So really the only time you have to press a keyboard button is when you want to orbit around the thing, and that's with the Alt key. So that's your basic navigation. I don't think there's anything else you would need to know really on that. So let's get started with objects here. And just like a quick I don't know, like a quick preview on something that we're gonna do is we're gonna try to do these battle acts here, and you guys need to have Photoshop for this tutorial. I hope you have it. I guess you don't have this image. I guess that, oh man. I'll link the image later, but for now, I guess I should link it. I have the link actually, so I'm gonna put the link here on the chat. Let's see if that works. I think I might have turned off link sharing. Oh, I guess there it is. So I think that worked. Let me know if you guys can get the image. Because yeah, I think you're gonna need it actually. Awesome, cool, it works. So yeah, there's the image. We're gonna work on this one. As you can see, like this is something that I want to talk about kind of quickly here. It's kind of a crappy drawing. It's not the best drawing in the world, but that's okay. This almost looks like 3D artist concept art. A lot of 3D artists aren't the greatest concept artists or are even very skilled in drawing. But okay, this is very important. Like the main thing, like I mean, I know 3D artists that probably have never even drawn a single thing in their lives, but they're great 3D artists. But the reason why that is because they have a vision, like they're able to visualize what they want, so they can go straight into 3D without ever having to draw anything. But I would highly recommend being able to draw something at least to this quality, to this level of quality. That's why I didn't want to choose some crazy elaborate thing right now, because I want to show you guys that even something that looks like a crappy drawing like this can actually become something pretty cool. So anyway, we're just gonna look at it right now. Here's the image, and we're gonna look at how you make just simple objects in Max. Your most basic object, of course, is your box. So you go to the Create tab, and just the default options that are set already is like this geometry button is on, and it's standard primitives, and like the first thing you have is the box. So you just click a box, you basically just click and drag on the viewport, and you can see how I am creating just the bottom of the box, because like as soon as I let go, the box will just grow as long as I keep moving my mouse up. So here's the box. If you want it to be a very specific dimension, you can type it in here. Like for example, a nice number like 128, 128, 128. This is like a perfect box. And here's an important thing too, like the point at which the transform gizmo is at is the pivot point. And pivot points are extremely important. They might not sound like something that's that important, but they are like one of the most essential things on a 3D object. So right now the pivot point is, I think it's at the center of the original box that I created. So when I made it 128 by 128 by 128, who knows if it's already at the center. So, but that doesn't matter because there's actually an option to center the pivot to the object. Not that this is something that you have to do for everything. In fact, pivot points determine a lot of what the behavior of the object in a game engine. So pivot points can be anywhere from a corner of the object to the center of the object to the bottom center of the object to the top of the object, or sometimes even way outside of the object. But just to keep it simple, just to center the pivot point on an object, you have to go to this hierarchy tab. Super important tab to know. And most of the things that I ever deal with this tab is this button right here, affect pivot only. So what this means is that when you affect the pivot only, you get these like extra arrows on your gizmo. So what that means is if I move the gizmo, all I'm affecting is the pivot point. See how like I'm moving this thing, but the box is not moving, and the pivot point is, and that's how I can put the pivot point anywhere I want. But right now, I just want to center it in the middle of the object, and there's one button for that, and it's also down here. It's called Center to Object. And I'm just going to press it, boom, and there it is. The pivot point goes to the exact center of whatever object you're working with. It could be a crazy shape of an object. Max will still calculate what the center point of that crazy object is. So something that we can also do right now to make things look a little bit cleaner is you can see that now my box is like not really in the center of the grid. It's just kind of out there. So for perfection's sake, let's put it right in the center of the world. So we are going to click the Affect Pivot Only button again to go off of that mode, so I can start affecting the box again. And we're going to look at these numbers right here. Here on the bottom right-ish, kind of like more towards the center, you can see the location of the object in max units, whatever units you have set up. Right now, we're not really going to worry too much about the units yet. But as you can see, it's not zeroed out. It's like at 19.076 minus 14, blah, blah, blah. So in order to center this right at the middle of the world, you just zero it out. So like you x0, y0, and C will be 0. But as you can see, this is also pretty good because like we have the box right on the center, and the bottom of the box is like right on the grid. But I'm going to center it out anyway. So here's a nice clean box right in the middle of the world. So that's a little bit on pivot points and placing things right in the center of the world. And that's important because also because of game engines. Like a lot of game engines will take something from Max, and if you don't do something a little bit fancy, you have to put your thing always right at the center of the world. Or rather, whatever, like if your object is in the center of the world, it will come into the game engine with the center of that object being just like it looks like in Max. I guess what I mean is this. If I put this object in Unreal, when I put this object down on like a piece of geometry or the landscape, the box will actually be going through the ground. It will kind of simulate this. But let's say that I put the box here and I export this into Unreal. Even though in 3D Max the pivot point is at the center, like Unreal doesn't really care about that, and it's still going to think that the pivot point is the 0 location in the world. So when I place this object in Unreal, it's going to be kind of way out there. It's going to be kind of floating out there in space. So I just mentioned that because it's important to know what the impact of the pivot points and the location of objects have when you import them into a game engine. And there's other ways to deal with this, but this is the most basic thing to know. Another thing to know about like creating these primitives is that this object, I still can't edit it. I still can't select a vert or a face or an edge and move it around. Like, as you can see, when I'm in this modify tab, all the options I get are still just like these length measurements or the segments. Like, if you guys want to see like what the segments do, is something good would be to make it like 4, 4, 4, like 4 segments all throughout. So now you get like a nice Rubik cube type of thing going. I mean, this is basically the iterations that you're gonna get on whatever object you create. Like most primitives have these kind of options where you can type in how dense you want it to be. It's pretty basic stuff. So like if I do something crazy like 64, 64, 64, well then you get like this super dense box with like a ton of little faces. I definitely wouldn't recommend trying to work with stuff like this. It's hell. So like always keep it pretty low poly, pretty low density. 3D Max is not the best thing to use for like super high res stuff like the previous example I was showing. Is there a keyboard shortcut to turn on the segment lines? The lines are hidden for me. Oh yeah, sorry about that. So like F4, let's see. This is sometimes kind of wonky, but I'm gonna see like it's basically these options right here. These realist. If you go to your viewport options right at the top left, you'll see that you have like all these different shading options. The newer Maxes have this new one called realistic. So that one is okay, I guess. Sometimes I like using shaded because it's less fancy, like it's less distracting. It doesn't try to like render shadows or anything like that. So shaded is a good one, but just like that question that Winston had, the reason why the faces aren't showing is because like edged faces wasn't on. So you're basically looking at the geometry like pure, like it doesn't even show you the iterations. But if you press F4, try pressing F4 a bunch of times as you look at your object in the viewport. And if Max isn't glitching out on you guys, because I know this is a glitch that I deal with a lot at work. Sometimes F4 gets like, it doesn't work anymore, but it should. So like what F4 will do is it will switch between looking at the object like pure like this, or looking at it without the lines. But usually also when you select an object, the lines should be like obvious. Like I think that when you select the object, you can't escape the lines. Like they should always be there. So let me know if, okay, cool. And I use like different colors for my max. My max probably looks kind of weird to you guys, but everything should be the same. So there's the box, very simple stuff. Just kind of some history here. This is kind of obsolete at this point, but historically, a lot of people used to model with a technique called just box modeling. And what box modeling was is people literally started anything from a box. A character, a car, a freaking tree, whatever, you know, like that's kind of like beauty of 3D, I guess. You can really start from anything as long as you know what you're doing. You don't really have to like start from a sphere or like anything fancy. Like a box used to be like the standard object to start anything as. Like even a face or something like that, you could literally start with a box. So that's kind of something to keep in mind, just to know that like there's so many approaches to modeling something in 3D. So I think we should get right to just with this box. Just bear with me. We're gonna use this box for a bit now, just to learn some of the basic functions that you guys should learn for modeling in 3D. And in order to do that, well, we have to make this box something that we can edit. And I'm gonna hide my buttons here, or I don't want to set them up again. So, but you guys probably don't have anything here. Like it's probably blank. It probably looks like something like this. So you have your parameters, and that's it. There's nothing else. So click this button right here on the bottom right of this sort of dialog, and just go show buttons. And whatever buttons are showing up for you guys here, if there are any, I honestly don't remember what the default buttons are. Just get rid of them. They're probably useless. Like you don't need the default stuff. And the way to change that is click the configure buttons button again, and you're gonna see this. And for now, I'm going to like okay, I'm gonna save my buttons. Okay, and then I'm gonna, I guess I can start from scratch, or I'm gonna like just show. I'm just gonna make some buttons that you guys should probably get started with. I'm not gonna go too crazy with a lot of the buttons that I use, but I'm gonna like set up some basic ones here. So what these buttons do is they make it easy for you to reach modifiers. Like these modifiers are like the meat and potatoes of like modeling in 3D. Like all this stuff right here is like the main thing. They're basically geometry modifiers. Like all these things modify geometry in every possible way. So the first ones that you should add are edit mesh. So like go to the top and you can see how it says channel info. There's some stuff there. There's max edit, and then you get like edit mesh, edit patch, edit poly, edit spline, blah blah blah. I think edit mesh is one of the best ones to use, and edit poly as well. And you guys are getting like my method. A lot of people don't even bother with edit mesh anymore. and I don't blame them. I think this is sort of like a maybe like a clunkier, more old school way of modeling, but to me it's essential. I need to use Edit Mesh for a lot of things, and I'll probably explain why later. But Edit Poly is like, it's very powerful. Edit Poly is like, you could literally just do everything with Edit Poly and you would be okay. But actually, like, Edit Poly can be pretty advanced too. Like, I think it's better to learn both. And I'll probably start with like Edit Mesh and Edit Mesh and then go to Edit Poly. But I also want to show you guys some other basic functions so that you don't get too overwhelmed with all the options that are in Edit Mesh and Edit Poly. So we're gonna keep going down, and once you get started on the max standard ones, look for Extrude. Extrude is a really basic one that you guys should add. So Extrude. Bevel is another good one. So I'm gonna keep adding buttons here. Bevel. So add like 2 more, so you have 6. Let's see what else should be good. I think slice is a good one. Like, it's good to know slice. This is something I use all the time, so I'm just gonna leave it there. I already had it. And I think that's good for now. If we need one later, we'll add it. But I'm just gonna leave. Let me get this bevel one out. I guess like you guys can add push. Push is a really good one. So like I'm gonna replace this bevel that I have here duplicate. I'm just gonna add push there. So we have like 6 really good ones, and I'm gonna add 2 more that are super important. And these have to do with texturing. So let me find it real quick. Okay, so like go down until you start seeing like another set of modifiers. Like look for max surface, and once you find max surface, grab UVW map. This is like extremely important right here. So UVW map, boom, add it to the list. And then keep going down and find these max additional ones and unwrap UVW. Super, super important. Boom. So now we have like 8 buttons right here that are really good, really useful. I'm just gonna hit OK, and now they are here. And I'm gonna show you why like I add the buttons. If I don't add the buttons, every time I want to use any of these options, I have to click this little arrow right here and find the thing that I want and click it over and over again. Like it gets to be very time consuming. Like there's people that don't use the buttons and they always trip me out because I'm like, how can you stand going back to this thing over and over again? It's dumb. Like you gotta have the buttons. These are essential. So first things first, we need to make this editable. So just go to the Edit Mesh button, just press it. There you go. So now we can actually start editing this box with moving the verts, moving the edges, faces, polygons, the element, etc. So like let's go over these. If I want to edit the vertices, click the vertex button, and now all the verts on the object are gonna get highlighted blue by default. These tiny little dots everywhere on the object. So go to the Select Object tool. This is the tool that I usually have on most of the time. This little arrow in the box, it basically is like your selection tool. It's not a move tool, it's not a rotate tool, you're just gonna select things. So I just click on the vert and just click it. So like you just have it selected, right? So in order to move it or rotate it or something, you have to use this button right here, select and move. So like, and there are shortcuts for these, like W is move. So you can just use the shortcut W. I tend to like hijack some of these shortcuts for myself. So some of these might not be the same for you guys, but I'm basically just going to show you by the button, and then you can look what the shortcut is. You should definitely use shortcuts, but I kind of just want to show you guys the basics. So now I can move this vert. I select it and I can move it around and do like stupid things with it. Like, you know, why would you want to do this? I don't know, but like, there you go. I'm moving the vert. And you can select more than one vert, of course. You're not stuck to just selecting one thing at a time. And you can just drag select, like you can just click from a blank spot in your window, and as you drag select, you'll make a box, and you select as much stuff as you want. So now I select all those verts, and I can move them and do whatever I want with those verts. And I'm just undoing every time what I'm doing, just Control C. Sorry if that wasn't obvious, but yeah, just anytime you do something like that, just to test it out, just Control C will bring you back to normal. And something important to see here in this little example that I just showed is, as you can see, like I selected some of the verts back here that maybe you might have not wanted to select, because like I was just looking at this and I was doing this, and oh, it selected some verts back there. I didn't want to select those verts. Well, there's an option that helps that, and it's called Ignore Backfacing, and it's right here. Right where the sub-object elements are, these vertices and edges and all that, there's like this Ignore Backfacing thing. So like if you have that on, I'm going to do it again. When I do this and I drag select, it doesn't select the stuff that's like facing backwards. Like the stuff that's facing the other way, it won't select it. So that's pretty useful when you want to be selecting stuff and not worry about it selecting the things that are behind it. It's a very useful thing to use. But I'm gonna just word of warning. Sometimes this is not like, it's not 100% reliable. I mean, it is for the most part, but sometimes you'll have objects that are so complex that when you start doing that, it will still select stuff that's behind it. So you just gotta be careful. Like every time you select things, at least double check just to see like you don't have any other stuff that you don't want selected. Another thing to know right now that we're selecting stuff is, well, what if I want to select some of the stuff behind it and be a little bit more methodical about it? You could actually make this wireframe by pressing the F3 button. So if you press the F3 button, your view should go to wireframe mode. So I'm looking now through the object as a wireframe. But as you can see, even as a wireframe, when I drag select, it still knows that it shouldn't select the verts behind it. But if I uncheck that option and I do that, I can see what verts are getting selected behind. And I can actually keep going, selecting them. So sometimes that's useful. And another thing that might not be obvious is that when you select stuff, to select more things, you use Control. Not Shift, Control. So I have Control pressed down, and I'm dragging more selections, and it's selecting more stuff. And if I actually want to deselect some elements, I press Alt. So Control, you just keep adding stuff. And then if I press Alt and I drag, it deselects some other verts. So that's some basic vert selection stuff there. You will be doing that a lot for sure. And let's keep going to the next sub-object elements. So these are the sub-object elements. I guess it's pretty straightforward. Just these are the sub-objects of the main object, right? So you have vertices and you have edges. So the edges is the same thing. You're just selecting the edges, and you can just move them around and do whatever you want. Not just move them around. There's more things that you can do with them. But there you go. There's triangles or face actually. So this is one of the coolest things about Edit Mesh, is that you can actually select triangle faces. So if you look at these box, it all looks like square quad faces, right? Like they're called quads when it's like a square. Basically, it's a quad because it's got 4 points, and that's it. Usually tries are 3 points, but this is kind of a little bit confusing because like most people don't realize like when people say a poly is very confusing because the slang is like, oh, it's like 3,000 polys, right? But it's kind of wrong because like what you're actually saying is 3,000 tries, or at least that's what you should be thinking about in terms of tries. In fact, press 7 right now, and I think for most people, like please write there if this is true or not. But if you press 7, I think you should get some statistics here on the viewport that show you like poly count or triangle count and stuff like that. If that's not the case anymore, because that used to be the default shortcut. But if that's not the case anymore, you can still bring them here by going to Configure Viewports. And there's like a Statistics tab. And it has here all these things that can show you like polygon count, vertex count, frames per second, triangle count, edge count, total and selection, blah, blah, blah. So the default is actually not great because it's actually telling you just the polygon count. I actually think this is one of the most confusing things for new 3D artists. Like they will get confused between polygon count and triangle count. So I would actually recommend not using polygon count and instead using triangle count. This is your real count. Game engines care about triangles, not about polygons. In fact, polygon count is pretty much useless as far as game development goes. Like I don't even know why this exists, to be honest. I think they should just nuke that option, but it's probably useful for some other things that I don't care about. But let's just go with triangle count. Vertex count, it kind of is useful, but not really. I think Unreal also cares about vertices. So, oh yeah, I think they changed that. It used to be that. So let's just turn it on through the viewport configuration. Like I don't know why they changed that, but that happens a lot. They just change things. So yeah, let's just grab it from the viewport configuration, and let's get rid of the options we don't need. Also, just total here is not very useful. Actually, total and selection is the best option because actually total, in fact, is not super useful because total only tells you the amount of triangles that are total in your max scene. And by the way, I'll probably say polys a lot, but I mean triangles. Like if I say tries or polys, I always mean triangles. Like that's why it's confusing. Like, and most people say, oh, it's 3,000 polys. Like you'll hear that over and over again, but what they actually mean is triangles. So total and selection is usually the best. Although really, you're the one that you want to know more about the most is your selection, the thing that you have selected, the thing that you're working on. Because you can have a scene with a ton of crap in it, but you're only really working on one thing that's right in the middle of it, and the total at that point is kind of useless. Like you don't need to know really the total. The total actually, what is helpful for is if you have a max scene that is just way too crazy and you're adding way too many things, once you start to get to the millions of polygons there, then it's not very good. You have to kind of cut back. So, but I love total and selection, so I recommend that. Vertex count, you don't really need. Frames per second, you don't really need at all unless you're animating or something, or you're like just monitoring your computer's performance. So like I wouldn't even care about that. I think vertex count and triangle count are really all you need, and I think you just gotta check this box here that just shows statistics in active view, say apply, okay, and then you'll get this nice little it'll show up in like a bright text here on the top right, I mean top left, that tells you like how many tries this object has. So anyway, kind of got sidetracked there on that whole triangle polygon thing. But anyway, what I was saying about edit mesh is that it lets you select triangles. And I think if you press F2, it changes between having your selection just be displayed by the outline of whatever you have on, or have it actually be shaded. So you definitely want it shaded. This is not very useful. It's sometimes even hard to see. So definitely always have it be like shaded. So as you can see, like I'm selecting this thing, this space, and it's just one of the tries that makes up this square face. And as you can see, like I can't see the line that actually divides this quad. I can kind of see it when I select the triangle, but by default, I don't see it. And I'm just going to show you guys this because I feel like it's essential to know this for anybody working in 3D. And in fact, I've known people that have never even looked at this option, and sometimes they don't know why they have weird shit going on in their models. And it's because they are not paying attention to what are generally called the hidden lines, or the edges of all the polygons that make up this object. So in order for you to see them all the time, and this is something that I'm just going to show you, and probably I'm going to turn off right after I show you, but I just want you to know that they exist and that you should be aware of them, and that even when you look at objects that look clean like this with no lines inside or anything, remember that everything is made up with triangles. So like if you don't see it, there's like lines going on in there all the time. So anyway, you right click the object and you get all these options. But the only one that we're going to look at right now is somewhere here around the bottom, I mean, and it's called Object Properties. Click that and you get this stuff. This is a great little dialogue right here that is very, very useful. And for now, we're just gonna worry about general. Like all these other ones, you don't really have to ever worry about. In fact, I don't ever go here unless I'm rendering something or doing some fancier stuff. But for game stuff, I don't think this is even used at all ever. So all you have to worry about is general. And as you can see, there's an option here that's checked on by default called edges only. So if I uncheck that and I say okay, boom, now I'm looking at all the hidden lines that split all of these quad faces into triangles. And you can actually edit these lines. Like these lines are not like locked or hidden, or I mean they are hidden, but like what I mean is like they're not like secret lines or something. You know, like you can edit them, you can make stuff with them, you can extrude them, you can do all kinds of things with these lines. In fact, you can turn them if you want with this turn button right here. But I'm gonna turn it back. I'm not gonna get into like the whole turn and divide thing yet. But I just want to show that all these lines are there at all times in every 3D object, and most people don't care about them, which is kind of crazy to me. I'm one of those sticklers that I need to know what those lines are doing at all times. I don't like working where, oh, I don't see those lines and I'm just going to forget about them. No. Like, that can actually cause some problems. So even though this looks nicer and less intimidating, well, those lines are not going away anytime soon. They're still there. But you can turn them off again by going to the same thing, turn edges only on, and then you're back to this nice looking thing. So I'm gonna keep going here. So if I choose polygon, see that's where it makes sense. It's a polygon, it's not a triangle. So when I click on it, it selects the polygon. And actually, it selects anything that is divided or delineated by hard lines like this. And I'm gonna show you kind of what I mean. And you don't have to follow this. I just wanna show you. I'm gonna divide this line quite a bit. As you can see, I added like 3 verts right here. So now this thing is no longer just 4 verts and a quad. It's not, now it has like all these other sides. But still, when I click it as a polygon, it still selects the whole thing. Like it still doesn't care that I added all these new verts because there are no hard lines anywhere in there. Oh, but guess what? If I select one of these hidden lines and I make it visible, well, now when I select the polygons, now it knows that, oh, okay, there's something dividing this thing right in the middle. So like when I see it here, yeah, you can see that there's a hard line there that I made myself, and now that's why the polygon selection goes between the two. So I'm just gonna undo all that. Oh man, I think I might have gone way too far on my undo. So I'm just gonna like nix that edit mesh, and here I'm back to normal. So that was just a way for me to show you guys how like the polygon selection thing works. It basically will select anything that's within those hard lines. And then element is pretty obvious, like it selects the whole thing, like a whole, anything that's welded together, it selects. And what I mean by that is, for example, I'm gonna do something here, you guys don't have to follow this along. I'm gonna like detach this section, but keep it in the object. So like this is still one object, but when I select this element, it doesn't select the other one because the verts are no longer welded. See, like I moved it away because I detached it to element, and the verts are no longer welded. Actually, I guess I should like show you guys how I did that. This is important actually. So let's look at that again. I undo everything. I'm back to the element being a solid thing. And I selected like 1/2 of the box. You right click it, back to these options right here. So I'm sorry I'm not explaining everything here. We'll just look at every option as we go along. And in this tools 2 box, it goes create polygons, attach, detach. That's the one we want right now, detach. So I'm gonna detach it, click that, and you get like a few options here. You can detach it as another mesh. So like if I do this, I think this is the default option. When I do this, it's gonna create a new mesh that's a completely new object called mesh 001, and I'm not gonna be able to edit that mesh anymore as long as I'm like editing this one right here. So like that's useful for some things. I'm not gonna do that right now. I just want to detach it, but keep it within the same object. So for that, you just select detach to element. And then you select that, and now it's detached, but it's still within the element. It's not another object. I can still select this one. I can still select this one. I can still select verts from both, and I'm still in the same element. So that's very useful. Give me a second. I'm gonna get like some water. All right. And I'm gonna like start something else here. I feel like that's a pretty good, just barely like a brief explanation of what the sub-object elements are in the edit mesh dialog. Keep it nice and simple. But what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna start to show you some of the really cool options that you can do with 3D Max. And these are one of my favorite options. To start, let's delete the other half. Just get rid of it. Get out of the sub-object mode editing by like clicking on the element button again. So like basically whenever you deselect any of these, you're kind of back to editing the object by itself. You're no longer editing any of these sub-object things. So like let's get back to that mode. And here you have a nice half hollow box with the pivot right in the center of the world. And I'm going to do something now that is extremely essential to game asset development. So pay attention to this. This is very important. And I'm going to like explain why. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a copy of this box and I'm going to mirror it. So shift drag, select your box and shift drag it and just wait till you get this dialog right here. So you have a few options here. You got copy, you got instance, you got reference, and you got number of copies. Like I could like type like a crazy number here, and it'll just go like tick 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 tick. Like it'll create all these copies. It's pretty cool, but we're not gonna do that right now. And you can name it or something. I'm just gonna leave the default name. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make it an instance. So don't worry about copy for now. That should be pretty straightforward. It's just a copy. What I want to show you now is like this instance thing. So now it's an instance, and as you can see, if you look at the way this looks like here on the modifier tab, like the letters got bold. Like the letters that say edit mesh here in box, they're bold. So whenever you see these bold letters, oh wait a second, it gives me a clone part of the mesh box instead. Oh, I think you're still on sub-object mode. Like if you're just creating not actual copies of the main object and it's still just faces of the object, I think what you might have done is you might have still been in element mode. So you have to get out of there. So like I'm gonna do it again. Like if I'm on element mode. Oh, okay, cool. So yeah, that was it. So like yeah, get out of element mode and shift drag, and then you get these options, and then you go instance and say okay, and you should get that that bold lettering there. So now we have these two objects, and I just want to show you what this means being instanced. It basically means that it's like a twin or like a clone of the object, but like go to the vert mode and move a vert around, and as you can see, like both the same verts move in the exact same way on both objects. They're like clone objects or twins, or I guess instances is the official nomenclature for that. So like let's just use that. That's like a word that's used in game engines as well. A lot of objects in game engines are instances of each other, which means that they're like the exact same thing. So it's not like the game engine is creating a new object. It's the same object, but it's just another draw call. But we'll get into that later. So as you can see, like now these objects are linked. They're the same basically. But This is not as useful for developing an asset, having these objects like this. So I'm going to show you what you need to do to make this something useful. We're going to mirror the object that we cloned on the y-axis. And in order to do that, you can go to this button right here. It's like the quickest way to do it. It's a button that looks like this weird shape that's being mirrored by a line in the middle. Pretty straightforward. And I guess yeah, just press that button. And when you press that button, you get some options for that as well. Like it asks you like what axis you want to mirror it at. And it looks like we are on we want to mirror it on the y-axis. I think I might have like gotten off axis a little bit here. I don't know if you guys are on the like y or x axis. I think by default they should have probably been x. So I think I'm gonna rotate these objects so that we're on x. Again, I wanna keep this pretty default. Or I don't know what axis you guys are at. Honestly, like this is I can't. So but I'm gonna put it back to x. This is not the preferred axis. It should be x. So here you go. This is kind of how it should be. So like I'm looking at the object. It's easy to get lost when you're perspective mode because there's really nothing telling you what's the front and what's the left and what's the right. So I think that's what happened to me right now. So yeah, it's better to keep it on the x-axis, and I'm going to show you why. Because if I go to like front view, I want this to be the front. And we'll see why in a second. So anyway, let's try to get it set up like this where when we mirror it and we choose the x-axis, this is the result we get. Basically, like the hollow parts of the box should be facing each other like this. It's almost like we're trying to put the box back together. And the best way to put it together back to its perfect location, I think for something like this box, one way to do it would be zero it out, because the axis, I mean the pivot point is still at 0. So since this side of the box had the pivot point right in the center, just like this other side of the box, then if I zero it out, it's going to go back to like its exact previous location. But let's say like when you do this, like you kind of messed up the pivot point and it's all over the place. And if you zero it out, it's really not going to match. Or let's say you want to do it quick and dirty, like I usually like to do. So we're going to use the snap tool to snap it into place by the vert. And you guys have to set this up. So like the snap tool is this little magnet looking thing here, like right in the middle of the toolbar. Or depending on if you move these buttons around a lot, then it's not going to be there. But just look for a magnet tool that has like a 3 in it. And there's like these 2, and there's this 2.5, and there's 3. For now, let's just worry about 3, and I'm going to explain what 2.5 does later. So 3 is good. And now, when I move my cursor over some of these verts, you'll see that it kind of like creates like a little crosshair that snaps to some of them. But before we do anything, right-click the snaps toggle button to get some options here, because by default, I don't think you guys are gonna have vertex. You might have grid points and face or just some dumb stuff by default. Let's get rid of those default options. So uncheck grid points. This is useful sometimes, but for the most part, really all you care about or you should care about is vertex. This is like one that I have on all the time, and pretty much the only one I ever really use. I sometimes go grid points, but vertex is it. You know, like face, edge segment, perpendicular, all these other ones I rarely use. Maybe I just haven't given them the chance really to find anything useful to snap to. So just have vertex on for now. That's all you need, and then just close the window. So basically, what that did is that the snap only works at vertex level. Like it won't try to snap to the grid. It won't try to snap to the edges. It won't try to snap to anything but the vertices. So now that we have that on, I can actually like put my move cursor over any of these verts, these edge verts right here, and then just kind of like drag and snap it to the box, and it's going to be like perfectly placed where it should be. So like it can be any of these edge verts, as long as you can match it to its correspondent vert on the other side, it's going to be perfect. So like practice doing that a little bit. Just kind of like snap it to the other half, and there you go. Our box is now whole again. But one side of the box is another object that is an instance of the main object. And why is this super useful? Well, it's really useful for one big reason. If you think about characters in video games, for the most part, they're humanoid. And humanoids, humans, and animals too are pretty much symmetrical by design. So imagine having to like sculpt or model one side of the face and then the other one. It's gonna be impossible. Like, I mean, there might be people that have the patience and time to do that, but it would be stupid, really. Like, and like many other things, like look around your house. Look at how many things are perfectly symmetrical right in the middle. When you create something in 3D that is symmetrical like that, one of my golden rules is don't do the work again. You know, like don't like if something is symmetrical, all you really need to do or sculpt or model is one half, because the other half should get like made. It gets made automatically because it will be like an instance. So this is extremely powerful and one of the main things that you would need to know. So for example, if I select this face right here, oh man, come on. Okay, for some reason when I select it on the instance or the mirrored one, I don't get the shaded thing. That's like one of the weird viewport glitches that I think Max has nowadays. So like, just bear with me, or bear with Max really. So like I went back to the original object and I went to face mode and I'm selecting a face and I'm gonna move it. So now we get a nice, it does the same thing on the other side, and I'm starting to get something going on here. I don't know what it is yet, but something is happening. I'm going to show you how like people used to model characters back in the day when zebras didn't exist and all you had were pretty much just boxes, and this was like the cutting edge of technology. This is like some ancient prehistoric stuff right here. But I actually, like, when I first started learning 3D, this was not like frowned upon, you know, like this was actually normal. So yeah, like technology has gone a long way for people to make cool 3D art. But like I'm trying to model a head basically here. And as you can see, it's like one of the most clunky things in the world to do. But you know what? Like a lot of old game characters of old games that you probably played from back in the day were probably modeled like this. So here's like my very primitive Lego man head or something. And I'm just using a box, man, and starting to take shape. So I just wanted to show you that, yes, people did model things with boxes. And in fact, even though I'm kind of making fun of it, you should see this as how much you can do with just a box, and how much like even just a box can get you started on something. Um, so I'm not gonna take this too far. I just wanted to show you guys um, what this like instance thing does. So like as you can see, like I was telling you, like I don't like doing the work twice. Imagine doing all that stuff that I did here and then going to the other half and going like, oh man, I gotta match that now, and just like doing it again. It's gonna suck. It's gonna be really, really terrible. And actually, like if you guys are gonna use ZBrush for some of these stuff, it's essential, and I cannot like emphasize it enough. It's essential that your mesh remains completely symmetrical to the end. Like basically, like you should weld, you should attach the other half of your mesh once you're like completely done with it. Like it's like I'm done with the 3D Max part of this mesh. Now I'm gonna take it to ZBrush. That's when you weld it, and that's when you that I guess that's when you weld it, you take it to ZBrush. And the reason why I say that's important is because ZBrush actually detects symmetry. So the same thing in ZBrush. Like when you bring a symmetrical object into ZBrush, ZBrush will know that your object is symmetrical, and the things that you sculpt on one side get sculpted on the other side. So again, you're saving yourself work. You're not like doing the one side of the face first and then the other side of the face first. And like, don't get me wrong, there are characters, or there are like people that are more that get more in depth with their characters and their creatures and stuff. They don't usually leave it 100% symmetrical. You know, like in nature, human faces, even though they look symmetrical, once you look at them closely, they're not like 100% symmetrical, you know. But for game characters, you need to exaggerate that more. So like if you have like an old captain type dude with like a droopy eye, or like he has a scar on one side of the face, or like his nose is all fucked up, well, then you would not like rely too much on the symmetry. But to get the base look going, you would probably sculpt his face or model his face 100% symmetrical, and get it to a point until you're like, okay, now I can start messing it up, and now I can start breaking the symmetry. So like the symmetry thing is super important. Cannot stress that enough. And it's also going to help with the axe that we're doing. It's going to come in handy as well. Even radially, like actually, like something that I wanted to show is let's see how much I can do this. Probably not enough. So I'm just gonna pretty much start over real quick. I hope you guys didn't try to do that phase, because I hope you guys still have the nice clean box going. So I'm gonna start over here real quick. So I have my original side of the box. I'm gonna make a mirror. Oh, first I make a copy. I make it an instance copy. Then I mirror it. Oh, you did. That's awesome. Well, I guess if you trash this edit mesh thing that was on your box, you're probably gonna take it back to its original state. So you might want to do that. See if you can do that. Like when you trash that thing, it'll take your box to original stage, but there will be one on top because you made a copy before. So like you might have to delete the one that was like kind of like left like a remainder. So see if you can get it back to your trashed it. Awesome. Let's see if you can get it back to this point. Riff Lord. That's awesome. I take it he's another metal guy, I guess. But anyway, I'm gonna snap it back. So there I am. And I'm actually gonna show you like, this is gonna come in handy for the axe. Or it might come in handy. I don't know if I'll use it or not, but it's just worth doing. And you guys are gonna start to like trip out on what this is gonna start to become when I do this. So like just kind of like try to follow to follow this on. So like I'm back to that original point where I just had like one half is a mirror instance of the other half. But now I'm gonna delete this back half actually. Boom. So now I just have this. And not only that, I'm gonna delete the bottom half. Boom. So go off of sub-object element again, like don't have that on. So now you have like just a quarter really of that box and the other on the other side. Select both of them. Turn your snap off if it's still on. Like remember to turn your snap off because sometimes when you might still have it on and then you like shift drag and it just tries to snap somewhere crazy or it's kind of like it's not very smooth. So like if you don't want to snap anything anything at the moment, you like turn it off. So I selected both objects and I'm gonna drag down and I'm gonna make them an instance. And now I'm gonna mirror them but on the Z-axis. So like up and down. So now I have that. And now I turn on the snap. And now I move them back into place. And now I'm going to select all those 4 quarters, or 8ths, I guess, at this point. And I'm going to drag them here, make them an instance, and mirror them on the Y-axis. And snap them back. So now every quarter of this box is an instance. And this is when you can start to make some cool stuff like just select the corner vert on the top and just drag it and you start to get this crazy cool spiky thing going because basically every quarter of this box is an instance of each other. So like anything that you do on one, you're doing on all the other ones. And this is very, very useful to create things like this that might be like, like a morning star could be like an example where you might want like this radial type of symmetry. It's like, and by radial symmetry, I mean like the symmetry happens like radially throughout an object. And Cverse supports that. Cverse knows how to like handle radial stuff. It's very, very cool. But so like if you think of anything in reality, any object that might be composed of similar pieces all throughout, this is the type of thing that you need to think about. Like, how can I, like, if I had only made an instance of the half, well, I would have had to move this vert by itself, this other vert by itself, and so on and so on, and it would not be perfect. Like if I don't type in exact numbers and like really look at the math there, it would not be perfect. It wouldn't look as clean as this. So based on my motto of like don't do the work again, well, if there was an object that looked like this, like maybe I have an object that looks like this in my house, I would be like, well, it looks like every 8th of that object is the same. So I'm just gonna like isolate the one of the pieces and duplicate it over and over again as instances, and now I can just worry about one. So like now this is the only thing that you have to worry about, this part right here, and you know that every other piece on this object is gonna like do the exact same thing. It's really, really super powerful. It's pretty awesome, and I can keep going with this. And it actually like makes you even like look at it, it looks cool, you know, like you can actually get even creative with super simple stuff like that. Like, oh, that looks cool, you know, it looks like a caltrop or something, you know, like a ninja caltrop or or something like that, you know, something kind of like something you might not want to step on. And you could even go crazier. Like this is even just the surface of what you can do with this, you know, like okay, imagine if I make an object, imagine if every face of this box was an instance. that that could start to get really crazy, but just imagine the possibilities there. Like if every face of this object had been an instance, then anything I do to just one face happens on all the faces of the freaking box. And even though it would take a long time to make one face and then make a box out of like the one little face, you could be able you would be able to make some kind of really interesting stuff with that. Like that's when like some of this stuff, guys, actually is like this is how they do a lot of weird fractal stuff. Like they take one thing and they make that thing like they duplicate it all throughout like a spherical thing even. So like if I took a sphere and I was able to isolate like sections of it and instance it in like crazy 360 ways, you start to get some really, really interesting things. In fact, if I like take like one of these faces and I extrude it a little bit and I move it, it's like you start to get some even more crazy looking things, you know, like you can make things that look like viruses or something, you know, there a lot of like weird natural shapes are kind of composed in this way where everything is sort of radially um, symmetrical. So like even here now I have like this weird crazy um, space invader slash insect, I don't know what, you know, like I'm not even kidding, like you could pretty much take this object, throw it into ZBrush and make some kind of space alien out of it. But we're not gonna do that kind of thing yet. But anyway, this is pretty much like a very basic setup of things I want you guys to like know as far as what creating instances and mirroring things is. I think this is one of the most important parts of this tutorial. Just kind of knowing that principle, knowing that you can do that is like, it's extremely, extremely essential. I do that every day almost, like at work. I do that kind of stuff almost every day. I'm not even kidding. So I'm just gonna delete. You're still working on that instance box, but yeah, I'm sucking pretty bad getting these things to snap together. Okay, so like, did you remember to set up the your snap settings so that all you're using is the vertex? Don't have any of the default things on, and make sure that the snap thing has the 3 on. So remember to uncheck anything on these options except for vertex. That's the first thing. And then you just close that, and then you just make sure that the snaps has the 3 and it's on. And in order to snap them together, you have to put your cursor and your move tool. Okay, so you have that. Okay, so like when you have your move tool on, you have to be close to the vertex. See, like I'm gonna get really close to the vertex here. I guess I can't make the gizmo larger, but like when I have it around here, nothing is happening. But as I move it close to the vertex, suddenly like this little crosshair shows up. So what that means is that it's it's using that vertex as the thing that I'm gonna snap to something else, to another vertex at this point. Because remember, like, there's nothing but the vertex thing on now. So if I move it away, it's gonna try to snap to any vertex that is in its proximity. See, like, I'm moving it around here, and any vertex that it finds in its proximity, it's gonna like snap to it right away. But the one I really care about is this one over here. So like, I just kind of move it close to this one, and boom, it goes like, it kind of automatically just kind of jumps to it. So it's a little bit, takes some time to get used to. It has this thing called a rubber band. Um, I, I'm pointing at it with my finger right now, but I think that doesn't make sense. But it's this yellow line. I don't know if you see this yellow line that is happening between this point and the center. It's like, honestly, I don't even know what. I mean, there's some kind of explanation to that, but it's not something that is super essential. Really, the essential part is you have your vertex snap on. You move your cursor near a vertex until you get a little crosshair, and then you move it near any other vertex on an object, and that's how it snaps. So let me know if you still have problems with that. I can keep going on that. And yeah, don't worry, Winston, about like the not following. I don't want you guys to try to follow along too much. Like, I guess try to follow along enough so that you kind of start to understand what the principles are. But I want you guys to also see what I'm doing, because like, once you, like, I'm not gonna delete this video for a while, or I guess as long as Twitch allows me to have it up there. I think it's like a week and a half or something. So like, I won't delete it. I'll try to like download it or something. But but whenever you sit down and do it on your own, that's when you really are gonna start learning. Right now, then it crashed. Oh my god. Oh, yeah, that's one thing. I'm gonna tell you guys, like, one of the things that I heard a 3D teacher tell me like a million times, and he said this over and over again. His motto was save often. Save often, save often, save often. This is for everything. And I'm sure like Winston knows this already with like working with Unreal. Is like, shit will crash all the freaking time. It's not even funny, and it sucks. Like, I've cursed at the computer so many times when you're just doing something stupid and you assume it's gonna work because it's just something stupid and you haven't saved, and it crashes and you lose work. So like, that is super important. Save your stuff as often as possible. And in fact, 3D Max has an auto backup thing that is extremely useful. Like, most people scorn at auto backup functions, and I actually hate the one in Unreal because it takes forever to auto save anything. But in Max, it's extremely useful. Like, the auto backup in Max has saved me so many times. I cannot even count them. You know, like, ever since I started using 3D Max, auto backup is the way to go. And I'm going to show you where to find your auto backup files. Actually, like, this is something that might be worth following here in a second. So like, let's say my thing crashed, or actually I'm just gonna like mess it up, you know, like, oh my god, like I'm doing, and I deleted a part, and you know, like, just kind of messing it up. Or whatever, you know, like, I don't know why it's kind of acting so slow. Okay, there you go. So like, I'm gonna make this, I'm gonna delete some faces. So like, I'm here, like, right? Oh man, like, I totally messed it up, right? So by default, the max auto backup, I think it's like 15 minutes or 5 minutes. I don't know exactly, but I think I can rescue the auto backup for this project quite. It should be, there should be something. So actually, like, auto backup files are saved somewhere that is totally not intuitive at all. It sucks. but Max saves a lot of stuff in your My Documents folder. It's it's stupid, and actually, like, I don't even remember that's like for sure. Let me make sure. So I'm just gonna go open. I'm not even gonna save this. Don't save. So yeah, like by default, I think Max goes to your scenes folder in your My Documents. Like this is your Windows documents, and this is where Max saves by default anything you kind of start working on. So actually, that's good. Like stay in this sort of in this directory and go up one level. Go to 3ds Max, and you'll see up here there's an AutoBack folder. Sweet, awesome. Go to that AutoBack folder, and you'll see I have 3 AutoBack files, and this is a default thing that Max does. By default, it'll just save 3. You can always go back. There's an option in there somewhere where you can make it like do 10 of them. You know, like 10 is actually might be useful, you know, because then you have 10 AutoBack folders, auto backup files that you can always go back to. So if you sort by time, then I can look at the one that's the most recent one, which is this one, and see actually like the most recent one is actually still have some of the information that I messed up. So shit, I don't really want that one then. I'm gonna go back even more. I'm gonna go back to like 8:54, like 8 minutes ago or something, or 6 minutes ago, and I'm gonna open that one, and boom, there it is. There's my crazy alien thing before I messed it up. So yeah, auto backup, very useful. Definitely don't neglect the auto backup. Um, I'm not gonna talk about where you set up the time and all that. That's like some more like program setting stuff that right now I don't really want to get into. But basically, you can edit the time intervals that you want Max to be auto backing at, and the amount of files that it's going to auto backup, or where they even go. You might not want them in that folder, but I usually leave it default. When I shift drag to clone, it's not giving me the rotate on axis. Oh, okay. So I think you're talking about. I don't know if you're trying to like mirror the thing or rotate it to get back on the x-axis. So if you are trying to mirror the thing, that doesn't happen when you shift drag clone. So like I'm gonna do it again here. I'm gonna delete all the other sides. And I'm just gonna go back to this one right here. Yeah, mirror. Yeah, dude. Remember, it's mirror, and it's like a separate command. So I'm back to this corner. I shift drag, and you make an instance, and just hit OK. And there's your instance. It's not mirrored yet. And then the mirror option is up here. Kind of just keep going from the snap button, and look at this mirror button right here. With the 2 things getting mirrored by a line, and then it tells you what axis you want to mirror it at. So it stays at the last one you used. So here it was Y. So I'm just going to go back to X, and there it is. Back to X. Turn my snap on. Put it back. I'm back where I started. This thing looks pretty good. So are you guys still pretty good to keep going, or do you want to take a break, or you want to leave it at this, or let me know. I can keep going for about another hour if you guys are cool. All right. Sweet, man. Awesome. So I'm gonna go back to like the primitive stuff, like creating primitive objects. I'm gonna delete this stuff. We don't need it anymore. And remember, we started with a box. So all that stuff was just a box. You can do it, a lot of stuff with just a box. So anyway, since we're gonna do this thing, well, what is the main element on this freaking axe? It's like the handle, right? It's like it's just one long tube. It's like if I look at this thing, I would be like, what is the main thing? Well, the handle. It's the simplest thing too. This will drive what we're gonna do. It's just the handle of the axe. And what is that thing? Well, it's uh, it's a cylinder. Even though it could actually be a box, but we're not gonna do that. Oh, and by the way, I'm still on the auto backup file. It's easy to like forget that you open an auto backup file. So that's a bad habit. Like whenever you open an auto backup file, try to save it as something else with a different name, like maybe back in your scenes folder right here. So I'm just gonna make it back to like, like test scene or something, whatever. There you go. Because like if you keep using the auto backup file, it actually like you use up that slot. Like auto backup is like, oh, I guess like I can't make auto backup 03 because like you're using that file. So it's good to like go back to like having a unique name on your scene and preferably saving it in a different folder, leaving the auto backup folder alone. And it can get really crazy. Like I've had files that are called auto backup 05 underscore 33321 underscore auto backup 03. Like, but that's what I mean with auto backup files. Like they can really be lifesavers. So as far as 3D Max goes, I would never turn off auto backup. For some of the programs, you might want to do that, like Unreal, but in 3D Max, I would never turn it off. But anyway, we're back to blank, back to the create primitives, and we're not even going to go through any of this. Like a lot of this stuff, there's just so much stuff. So like I don't want to overwhelm you guys with a lot of this other stuff. So we're just going to keep looking at the primitives here. And here's a cylinder right there. Boom. And okay, here's a case where I think turning on the snap to the grid is a good idea. And I'm going to show you why. So let's go back to the snap options, right click the button to get these options and leave everything blank, but now turn on grid points. So all I have right now are grid points and vertex snap. And as you can see now, when I move my cursor throughout the grid, it just lights up, and it's always saying, oh, I could snap to that, I could snap to that. Like it just any kind of point on the grid, it thinks it can snap to. And the reason why I'm gonna do it is because I can put it right at 0 and click drag my cylinder, and it will even snap to like the next grid iteration and have a really nice clean cylinder with very clean numbers that is right at 0 in the world. So once I do that, I can just move my mouse and the cylinder will grow as far as I can drag my mouse around. So I'm just going to leave it at something, whatever, right here. So that's good. And if you don't want to do the snap thing again, like I'm just gonna do it again just to show that it's not 100% necessary. That's only because like you might want to do it really fast and just go like, oh, I just want to put it at 0 and do it really fast. Boom, there it is. So if you don't want to even do that and snap is not even on, well, guess what? You can create your cylinder anywhere in the world and then just move it back to 0 here on the position of it. And there's my cylinder. And I'm going to go over some very interesting concepts here before I even get back to the axe. So like, get ready for another set of like 3D concepts that are extremely important. Like, I'm not talking about anything but things that I think are essential to knowing 3D modeling right now, and game modeling at that. Like, there are so many ways to model things for architecture and product rendering and industrial design and all that crap. Well, we don't really care about a lot of these things, but some of those things actually kind of like bleed into game development now, and more now than ever because game games have gotten so high res that things that were just for cinematics like 10 years ago, now you can just play a game that has things that were just for cinematics 10 years ago. And it's just going to keep going and going. So it's good to understand that some of the principles of like really high risk modeling. In fact, I think there will come a point in time when uh, game engines are going to support things that look like freaking Pixar movies, or things that movies like Avatar and stuff like that. And I mean, we're already kind of close to that. So like some of the things that I'm going to talk about now, all of my all of a sudden my viewport controls just got real slow. Hmm. That, I don't know why that could possibly be. Um, like the frame rate is really bad in Max or something like that. Or what kind of controls here? Like the rotate and the move and all of that. Like when I try to pan, it doesn't move. Oh, uh, hmm. Like at all? Like just clicking middle mouse button, just pan. It doesn't do anything at all. I guess if you're getting some really weird stuff like that, I would honestly say like just restart Max. I know it's kind of a pain, but like I can't, I wouldn't, it's really hard for me to know exactly what you're experiencing. So a restart might help you. If it's very slow, sometimes that's like it might be a performance thing, but I doubt like your computer might be like dying now, since you've already been going through this already. So like I would say just restart Max, and we'll give you a second, and then you can get back to like making a cylinder. I don't know, like it's weird. Like I don't know how why that would happen. So I guess let's just give Winston a second here. Hopefully restarting helps. Cool. Yeah, that's weird. When you get weird things going on in Max like that, sometimes restart is a good thing. Max can be a very glitchy program, unfortunately. Um, yeah, so yeah, but whenever you do something like that, remember like to save your scene beforehand. Just don't kill your scene. So anyway, as you can see, like I'm okay. So we made a cylinder, and it looks like this. It's pretty default. Um, and I'm gonna go to the modify tab again, like back to like the one that we had for the box, and it has very similar options as the box, like radius, height segments. Height segments are basically these lines that go like in height, so like I can lower it to like 0 if I want, and 0 means like there are not going to be any lines going through as it moves up in the height. I guess one. I guess it has to be one. It can't be zero. But like if you press zero, it will go back to one. Cap segments. Cap segments by default is zero. I'm gonna make this a different color. This is really bright and annoying. So anyway, to change the color of a primitive, the color of an object has nothing to do with like the texture on it. Like this right now, this thing doesn't have a yellow texture on. It has a color. Oh, there you go. So like, and to change the color, you have to click this box right here on the top right sort of area on the modify tab, and it's got like a little color box, and then you can choose another color for that object. Right now it has this bright yellow that's almost white. It's really annoying because it almost doesn't even let me see the lines. So like the colors that Max chooses on default objects is random. So sometimes you might want to choose a darker one, because darker ones are usually better because there's more contrast between your selected stuff and the lines and the segments and that. So like, see, like that's much better. Now I can totally see the lines. So yeah, I was at cap segments. So like cap segments, there are 2 right now, and it's just gonna keep adding and adding more cap segments to it if I want. Be careful when you modify these things, because like if you just drag up, you can just go crazy and like take this to like a crazy number, and sometimes Max can crash if you just drag it way too much. You'll go up to like 500 and it's just gonna be so high poly that it'll just kill your computer. So just be careful to not drag too crazy there. And I'm just gonna make it back to like default, which is 1. Like just like nothing really there. And the sides, actually, like out of all these options, sides is the most important. And I'm gonna tell you why. I'm gonna go to top mode, and there are shortcuts for like top, side, perspective, but the way I work, this is something that you might have to experience on your own. And like once you discover how you like working, these are things that are like, in a way, like it's good to like work with Max a lot until you almost start to like personalize it to how you like to work with it. I don't care about shortcuts for top side view. I usually just go here because I actually use like T, S, and some of those default shortcuts for other things that I use more. So that's why like I'm used to not going like top, like see, like right now I have like the default shortcuts and I pressed T and it went to top view. But if you want to reach that without the shortcut, you basically go here to the top left on the viewport options, select where it says perspective, and select top. So now I'm looking at this thing straight on from the top. And so if you look at this object, something that bothers me about it, honestly, is that on the top and the bottom, there is a straight line. There is no vert that reaches the center of the world on the on the y-axis. So like here's the y-axis, and I'm looking at this cylindrical thing, and the vert doesn't reach it. This right here is not very good. You don't want this default 18 side thing going on for the most part ever for cylinders for game stuff. And the reason why that is because you want cylindrical stuff in game stuff to always have a vert that reaches the center of the y-axis and the x-axis. So like, see, this is where this one is fine. On the x-axis, I get a vert here and I get a vert here. That's totally fine. I like that. But on this side, I don't. So like, I really don't like that. So this is one of those cryptic things that you should know about. For the most part, for most people, or for when I didn't know or I didn't care about any of that, I didn't care how many sides I had here. And if you think about it, like, why would you? You know, it's a fucking cylinder. Like, you know, it could be like 17 sides and it still looks round. Like, you know, like you would not really care too much about it, but you do have to care. Even see, like 17 is even worse. Like, look at this junky stuff. Like, I have like not even a half segment here. It's like just some random section where the y-axis crosses by, and then on one side of the x-axis is a vert, but on the other side it's a freaking line. So like this is even worse. Like, this is some dirty stuff. I would never select 17 sides for a cylinder unless I'm working on a thing that I don't even care about how many, like, any kind of technical things with that cylinder. Like, if I'm gonna make a tree or something like that that I'm eventually gonna like sculpt out in ZBrush, maybe I won't care about it too much. But even for things like that, I'd probably care about it a little bit. Like, it's just one of those things where it's like a principle thing. It's like, it's better to keep it sort of like clean and manageable for you to understand your shapes. So what is the best that I found so far for forever is 12. 12 is your magic number, and as you can see, even though it looks kind of low poly, don't worry about it right now, and I'm going to explain why you don't have to worry about that right now. And actually, I'm going to explain why it's actually good to keep it somewhat low poly like this. I think 12 is one of those magic numbers for me. It works really well. As you can see, like, I have every quadrant of this cylinder is pretty much symmetrical. And if you think about what I was saying before as far as instances, what does that mean? It means that I could probably edit even just a quadrant of one of these of the cylinder, and whatever I do to any of those quadrants is going to happen on each one of them. And I guess you can get crazier even. As you can see, like, I'm just gonna like draw some lines here for explanation purposes only. Don't worry about following these lines, but like this line and this line, there's three faces, or three slices really. See, like, three slices that make up every quadrant of the cylinder. So like, I could literally slice this thing like a pizza, you know, like top-down view, and make instances of every 12th, I guess, of this thing. And then whatever I edit on one of these 12ths is going to happen in all of them. So like, I don't know if that's already getting your brain going as far as the axe goes, but I'm already thinking in things I could do for the axe, or for some of the parts of the axe, where I can like just edit one quadrant, or even go as crazy as editing a 12th. I probably won't do that, but I just want to talk about why 12 is such an important thing with cylinders, and why all those default numbers are junk. So now I have my nice 12-sided cylinder, and now I'm going to explain a crash course on high-res modeling. So like, just kind of like, I know I'm going over a lot of different things, and they're kind of random, but they're all related. They're all gonna come together at the end. So just sort of bear with me. You guys are getting like the super crash course in 3D modeling here, like, where, like, I mean, you could have a full like course on just some of these things, but I'm just trying to show you guys like some of the most fast ways to get here. So anyway, I'm gonna show you guys an option called, it's not an option, it's more like a technique. It's a technique called not box modeling. It's called cage modeling, actually. It's a weird name, but I'm going to show you how it is. And actually, we're going to add a couple more buttons here to the buttons. So just go back to this button to configure the modifier. And let's add a couple more. And I usually add like 2 more. That's kind of an OCD thing that I do. I don't like just adding 1 more and leaving that blank space there. You know, it's kind of like if you're gonna add another row, why not just add another one and put something else there? You know, just don't waste the space. I guess is my thinking. So anyway, what you're gonna look for here is an option called Turbosmooth, and it's in the max standard section, and just it's alphabetic, so it's kind of easy to find. And just find Turbosmooth, and I guess if you added another button there, just leave it blank for now. We'll add something there later. Don't worry about it. I guess tessellate would be one. Actually, add tessellate. It's right next to Turbosmooth. Tessellate is related to Turbosmooth, but it's not the same thing, and we'll probably use it later. So just add it there, and just hit OK. Okay, so we're still like, we still haven't even made this thing an editable thing. It's still just a cylinder. We haven't even gone into edit poly. We're not doing any kind of crazy things yet. So if you want to just hit edit mesh again to have it be back to this point, to at least be able to edit some of these things, then by all means. And all I want to show you right now is what happens when you press Turbosmooth. So like, just have this cylinder like this, make it edit mesh, and just press Turbosmooth. Boom! Look at this. What is this? This is some crazy, like, this is just such an unexpected result, right? Like, you would think that adding Turbosmooth to a cylinder would just make it really, really smooth. Well, that's the goal. But there's a reason why this looks like this. And the best ways to explain it is actually by doing something. I don't want to get into like the specifics and technicalities of why this is. I think just by doing things, I'll show you guys why this is happening. So trash the Turbosmooth. Actually, like, I keep saying that. I don't know if it was obvious or not, but there's like this trash can icon that just basically removes any modifier that you might add to this stack, and just get rid of it again. And let's get back to the cylinder as it was. And actually try this. Go to Polygon Subobject mode and select the top polygon and delete it. And then select the bottom polygon and delete it. So now you have like a hollow cylinder going. And then get off of subobject mode, don't keep the thing selected, and now hit Turbosmooth again. Oh wow, look at that. What a different result. This is kind of more of what you would want, right? Like, this is more of what I would have expected to happen when I hit the Turbosmooth button. But it didn't happen before because it had those spaces there. So why does that happen, right? Well, in fact, it happens for a number of reasons, or maybe one reason, but so I'm going to delete the Turbosmooth again, and maybe I can get back to like, yeah, okay, there you go. So I hit undo a bunch of times, and I'm back to like this state. And I'm like, well, why did Turbosmooth mess it up so badly when I had those faces on? Because I want to keep the faces, like, you know, like you don't want to delete the faces, you might want to keep them. The reason why that is because Turbosmooth works at a quad level for the most part. And by quad I mean, like, remember I was talking about tris and quads? Well, this is a tri. right? But this is a quad because it's 4 points. It's 2 tries make up 1 quad. Beyond that, it's like more polygon and crap or whatever. I know this is all like quads, polygons, tries, polys. It's all kind of confusing, but you'll get the hang of it. So what Turbosmooth loves quads. So like this face right here is in no way a quad at all. This is actually like, again, if you right click the object, go to object properties and uncheck edges only, what are you going to see up there? Oh, that's what was going on up there. It's a bunch of lines. How can you get the top back? Okay, so that's a good question. Let's try to get that top back. So I'm gonna delete them. Gonna go back to normal. This is what we had before. So just try to keep. This is a point where I might start talking about random little functions that you should know about, and I don't really know what order these should be taught as. I've never really taught this myself. So I'm just going to show you how I would do it real quick and try to just keep track of all these things that I'm going to do, because all these things are going to be useful. So like this is one of those cases where I would use edit poly. I would go out of edit mesh mode, and you can just keep edit mesh like this and just hit edit poly, and then you're now in edit poly mode. So like you can keep adding things to this stack. It's not good to add hundreds of modifiers, because at some point max gets kind of crazy. So to just hit another edit poly, and I'll show you how to like collapse it or sort of merge them all together once you're like happy with how you're doing. So anyway, I just hit edit poly button, and now I'm in edit poly mode. And as you can see, it's kind of similar. It has like similar options here, but edit poly is a little bit more advanced in some ways. And one of the greatest options that edit poly has is this one here in the middle, this border selection thing. This one is super useful. So select border and click on the top edge. And when I click, you can see that it's selected like the whole ring. So basically, any open thing, like any hole like this, in edit poly mode, once you select border, it'll select the whole thing. And let's say this was the neck of a character without a head. Well, or like a finger without the rest of the finger, or you know what I mean. Like it doesn't even have to be like cylindrical. Like it literally will select the perimeter of any hole in your geometry. And once you have that there, there's like a little button up here in the edit poly options. So like there's a section called edit borders, and there's like extrude, insert vertex, chamfer, cap. Cap is the one you want. So like if I hit cap, boom, it caps it back to how it was, and it caps it in a way that, again, it doesn't. There are no lines basically. Yeah, like I don't even know what the hidden lines look like in this cap. To me, this can be a little bit dangerous, because it's like, what is going on there? Well, it capped it. You know, like a lot of people will just do that and forget about it. But I'm the kind of person that I would be like, I would still like to know the lines that make up this cap. I would not just trust it to be like that. So anyway, that's how you can cap it again. There's actually another way you can do that. So I'm just going to show you another way you could possibly do that. So I'm going to actually like trash the edit poly, and I'm back to this hollow thing. And actually there is a way to do it with edit mesh. Granted, it might not be as elegant, but I just want to show you that you can also do it. And you're actually going to learn another option here that you should try to keep track of, and it's like a very basic option. So it's this right here. it's an option for selecting things that looks like a selection box with like a little box going through it. And by default, it's not on. So what does that mean? Because I'm gonna try to select the border just like I did in Edit Poly, but I don't want to do it one by one. You can, but it's a little bit time consuming, right? Selecting every little edge by hand. It's not the best thing in the world. You can do it, but there's a better way. But if I drag select with the default on, oh man, I just selected all these other stuff because like my selection box included some of that stuff. So that's not good either. I'm like, well, what do I do then? Well, what I can do is I can turn this thing on, and basically what this means is that Max will only select the things that fully fit in your selection box. So these lines that are vertical, that are going all the way down, I didn't select them fully, you know. I'm just barely touching the top. So Max doesn't care about those because they're not fully enclosed within my selection box. So actually, when you press the icon on, you can see that it changes into like, there's like a box inside the selection. So it's kind of a weird thing to explain because it's like, it really is like Max won't select anything that doesn't fully fit within the selection box. It's really useful. So you should definitely know this because like sometimes you might want to like not have that and be like, well, I actually do want to select some of these lines and I don't want to have to drag all the way down. I just want to select like a little bit and boom, it will select it because like you're just touching it. Just touching it means that it will select it. So for capping this thing again, well, let's try it this way then. And I'm just gonna select the top. So there I am back to like kind of what I had with Edit Poly mode, right? I have those edges selected. Oh, but guess what? Like Edit Mesh doesn't have that cap option. So this is where like a lot of people will say, why do you even use Edit Mesh? Well, it's true. Like Edit Mesh is not as advanced as far as the options that it has. But I want to show you guys that you can do the same thing and not, okay, here's the important thing. I'm not showing you that you can do the same thing through Edit Mesh because you should do it with Edit Mesh. The reason I'm showing you is because you should be able to approach these things in every imaginable way possible. Or it might be a case where you might have to use Edit Mesh for some reason, or it's like you should not be limited or constrained. So that's why I want to show you. And just how I shift dragged a copy of a box on the previous section, if you shift drag an edge in Edit Mesh mode, and I think in Edit Poly too, like it'll like extrude it in a way where it remains a part of, so you're basically like, you're not making a copy of the edge like you would when you select an object. You're actually extruding another line, another edge from the previous edge, but there is a face like that connects them. So this is actually like a great thing to know, like, because like look at what I'm gonna do real quick. Don't try to follow this, you might get like lost, but just look at all the things that I can do. Drag selecting faces. Like I'm already creating some kind of interesting thing going on here, and I just keep dragging select, and then I shift drag select and I move up. So now I'm starting to get some interesting handle things going on here that are actually pretty cool. And I'm doing it just shift drag those edges over and over again, and then I move it, and it's like, yeah, you can do a lot of really cool stuff with this. You can just keep going and going and going. So definitely good to know. But like we wanted to just like cap it, right? I'm kind of taking it a little too far. So like if I just want to cap it, another super essential word and concept you need to know for 3D Max and just modeling in general is called collapse. So when you collapse something, so like look at the end of all the edit mesh options, pretty much the last thing is called collapse. So basically like just press it, collapse, it collapses whatever you have selected into a point. That's important. Like it'll collapse it to a point, not 2 points, not 3 points, like a point. So like you're basically like imploding a thing onto like a single vertex. And I mean, there's no other way around the usage of collapse. It'll literally, it just collapses everything to one vertex. That's how it works. So even if I select a bunch of verts here, like these verts on the side, and I collapse them, if I hit collapse, boom, it collapses all those vertices to one. I could literally select this whole object and collapse it to a vertex, which would be totally useless because like actually like a floating vertex in space could actually make your game engine crash. You know, like you never want just verts floating around like this. It's just dumb, right? But I'm just showing you as an example how collapse works. And it's not exclusive to vertices. It's not exclusive to anything. Like I can select edges. Like I'm gonna select the edges down here in the bottom, and I collapse it, and boom, it collapsed it to a point. So now I have like a cone of some sort, or I can select this face and I can collapse it. Boom, and it just does like using collapse like create some interesting results because like what is it gonna look like to collapse these faces? I cannot even guess. You know, like it's kind of this weird. Boom, that's how it looks like. It's just you gotta be careful because then you end up with weird things like this with faces on top of other faces. So like just don't abuse the collapse in ways that are just kind of weird and counterintuitive. You really just want to do it for like the thing that I showed you here where I collapsed where I extruded the surrounding edges. I shift drag with the scale. Oh, I didn't mention that actually. So sorry if I kind of lost you guys there. But basically, I'm gonna go back to selecting those, and I went to the scale tool. I think that's the thing I skipped. I didn't say that I selected the scale tool because basically the scale tool, if I select these edges and I scale them down, well, it's gonna scale them down to the center, right? Because I'm selecting the center area of the scale gizmo, and like using the scale tool, be careful because you might select just this like section of that goes between the X and the Z axis, and if you do that, it skews it like this. And sometimes it's like you might be working really fast and then you kind of do this a little bit and you forget about it and then you go back to your object and you're like, wait, why is it skewed? Oh my god, like I totally messed it up. So you gotta be careful. These annoy me actually. Like I actually never use the skewing myself. To me it just gets in the way, and now that I'm thinking about it, I'd probably try to find an option to turn that off so that every time I use the scale tool it only does it uniformly, like when you put the cursor right in the middle, like the middle triangles have to light up, all of them. Don't ever, or I mean maybe one day you'll want to skew something, but just be careful about that. So anyway, I had the scale tool on and I press shift and I drag with the scale tool and there it is. There's my cap in progress, and now I'm gonna hit collapse. Boom, and now it's right in the center. That vert is right in the center. Why is it right in the center? Because if you think about it, this object is right in the center, and it's a perfect cylinder, and a perfect cylinder is a perfect, polygon or circle. So it's gonna like collapse right into its center point. That's an awesome little icon there. Thank you. Actually, if I go top down, see like, and I go to wireframe mode, it's right in this. I'm gonna zoom in as much as I can, and it never goes away from the center. So I have a nice little cap there. I showed you guys 2 ways to do it, and I actually, you know what? This is just the way I think. I almost prefer this way because I can actually see the lines. I don't see that blank cap line, or I mean that blank cap that Edit Poly creates. That I don't know where those lines are going. So I'm actually gonna like cap the bottom here the same way with Edit Mesh. Just cause scale tool, shift drag, hit collapse, boom, it's right there. This object has weird shading because the smoothing groups are okay. Smoothing groups. Here's another thing that is important. Let's just go over it real quick. So the smoothing groups are, I guess, groups of smoothing information within one object. And by smoothing, I guess the best way to explain it is like, select your cylinder and then go to like element mode and select it. And then look at these smoothing groups section right here. And it's got all these numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, blah, 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 blah. Don't worry about that right now. Just hit clear all. So you cleared all the smoothing groups. What happened? Well, now your cylinder looks all faceted. Like, you can totally see how low poly this freaking cylinder is. It's not very pleasing to look at, actually. Oh, man. So even if I look at it without the wireframe, it still looks like crap. It looks like 1993 3D games, you know, where like things kind of still look really jaggedy and kind of like, there's a game called Virtua Fighter. Like when it came out, it was like revolutionary, but if you look at it now, you can see that the characters didn't have smoothing groups. Like they all look like this. But anyway, that was cool back then. So how does that work? Well, this is some kind of more technical 3D stuff, but it's really important to know. Actually, this is super important to know, more than you can imagine. So basically, what's going on here is that, as you can see, there's like a number here called 45. This number here, it's weird that it doesn't even tell you what it means, but it's basically an angle. This 45 means 45 degrees. What does that mean? It means that, okay, if I select all these faces, and I say auto smooth, or actually like, don't do auto smooth, sorry. Select all those faces and then just press 1. Just select the number 1 here. Now, all those faces, and go out of sub-object mode so you can see your cylinder like in its pure look. So now what happened, it looks like all the faces that I selected that I smoothed now look back to normal. But actually, like I totally kind of messed up. Sorry. Let me retrace this a little bit. Actually, you have to use auto smooth to make sense out of this concept that I'm talking about. Sorry, like don't think about these things a whole lot anymore. But anyway, so I'm gonna select auto smooth because the angle is related to auto smooth. So I'm just gonna press auto smooth. But guess what? It's gonna look the same, like how I did before. It's gonna look like this again. So it kind of looks better. It looks, and now it doesn't look as low poly. Even though it's that low poly, it doesn't look as low poly. Why is that? It's because Max is smoothing the normals, and by normals, okay, maybe I'm getting too ahead of myself. I'm not even gonna explain what normals are right now. But anyway, just bear with me. So Max is smoothing the normals of this face to this face because, and why is the 45 very important? Because it's any angle that is less than 45 degrees is going to get smoothed. Best way to make sense out of that is actually select the whole thing and press auto smooth again. Guess what? The top remains like its own smoothing group. Like Max didn't try to smooth between these faces and the top faces, because why? Because the angle between this face and this face is actually a 90-degree angle. So this is way more than 45 degrees. So then Max is like, okay, that's way more than 45 degrees, so I'm not gonna try to smooth between this one and this one. You're saying, you're selecting the whole thing, and you're saying auto smooth up to 45 degrees. So like all these faces that are on the cylinder are okay because none of these, like if you look at it from the top view, it's a better way to see it. None of these angles are more than 45 degrees. In fact, all of these angles are pretty flat, are pretty low degree angles. They're probably like 10 5-degree angles. So like it doesn't even try to smooth them. Now, if I increase that number, if I'm like, all right, well, what about 90 degrees? Okay, well, 90 degrees, select the whole thing and press auto smooth. Oh, okay, so I guess 90 degrees is still within that range of smoothing. So you have to go even higher here. Sorry. Let's see. 180, probably. Auto smooth. Okay, yeah. So at 180 degrees, yeah, I had to go even beyond 90 degrees. I guess 90 degrees, if something is at 90 degrees, that's the cap. So it won't try to smooth it. You have to go higher. So if I do like 180, then it's trying to smooth it all out. It's trying to trick you into thinking that this cylinder has no harsh edges between the cap and the side. It's trying to say, oh, this whole thing is smooth, so I'm trying to smooth it all out. Rendering wise, even like if you look at the shading on it, it looks kind of weird now. It's kind of like, what is this thing? You know, it almost looks like a candle or something, because like it's there's no delineation here between the faces. So smoothing groups are super important for you to like kind of like isolate certain things that you might not want Max to like smooth between. In this case, the top parts of the cylinder and the bottom part. So I'm gonna like, so this is where you get into smoothing groups. So these two things are related, but like auto smooth is usually like a solution for you to like just select the whole object, press auto smooth, and not deal with it at all. But smoothing groups is when you can actually get a little bit more intricate about this, and I'm going to show you why. So I'm going to clear everything, just clear it all, select the whole object, clear everything. So we're back to like this faceted look. and I'm gonna start making smoothing groups for this object. So I'm gonna select the inner faces of the cylinder and press 1. So what that did, so when you use smoothing groups and you press a button like 1, it doesn't care about any of these numbers that you might have pressed right here. And even if I had like 10 here and I go here and I press 1, it's still gonna smooth it out completely. Why is that? Because like every smoothing group that you create is like 100% smooth. It doesn't care about angles. It doesn't care about anything. It's just saying, oh, you are a smoothing group. Well, everything that is within this smoothing group is 100% smooth. So what I have right now is like, if I select these faces again, you can see that the 1 gets highlighted because that 1 is already having, there's already a smoothing group that exists there. It's that 1. So like, actually, if you select this button right here that says select by smoothing group and you press it, it actually shows you how many smoothing groups you have created. So at this point, there's only 1, and it's the one of the inner faces of the cylinder. So like, I'm gonna do something crazy and show you guys this. Like, if I select this triangle and this face, and then this bottom triangle, and I make that another smoothing group, I made it 2. So now, if you look at this, it looks really weird because you made this thing another smoothing group, and Max is trying to like make sense out of this. Like, oh, well, you made this face try to be smoothed with this next face, but this top face is still part of a different smoothing group, and these other faces are like another smoothing group, so it looks really weird. But you can do stuff like that to separate. In fact, if I look at it right here on the bottom, oh wait, never mind. I guess like it's kind of smoothing everything here, but you can see how like that triangle totally stands out because Max is trying to smooth that whole section that I selected. Or if I select just a random face here on the cylinder and make it another smoothing group. And by the way, to get rid of the previous smoothing group, so like let's say I select another face, see how 1 gets highlighted? If I uncheck that 1, it has no more smoothing group information anymore, and that face is gonna totally stand out. See how those faces that I either unchecked the smoothing group information on or made it a different one totally stand out now? That's because Max is no longer, that's because that face is no longer part of the smoothing group of the surrounding faces. It's its own smoothing group. It's kind of like it's saying, okay, like, well, this face has its own smoothing group, so obviously that's why it's not going to blend with the rest. So that's like a really interesting thing to keep in mind, because actually like Unreal definitely takes smoothing group information from your Max models. So like there are times where you might think it only is a Max thing. Well, no, it actually like really matters for Unreal. Like you need to know, you need to make sure you set up your smoothing groups correctly before you bring your things to Unreal. Like a lot of things like organic things like rocks and other things like I don't know like a pumpkin or you know like things that are for the most part 100% organic all throughout. It usually is like just one smoothing group. You smooth everything out. You try to make everything kind of like the same smoothing group. There's really no point in spending time separating things by smoothing groups. But once you start making things like weapons and armor and things that might have hard edges or things that might have things that you might want to like not smooth too much, well that's when smoothing groups actually like kind of come into place. And I think as game engines support more and more triangles and polygons, that might start to go away, but it's still good to know because actually, like some of the Turbosmooth technologies or like some of the ZBrush things that you might be able to do still kind of have a little bit of that smoothing thing going, and it's still useful to know. So I'm gonna like try to like get this back to normal here, selecting the top, clearing the smoothing groups, maybe making the top and the bottom one smoothing group, like clearing it and then making it one, and then selecting the middle faces and maybe clearing it and making it two. So actually what I did here was, if I look at my smoothing groups, there's like two smoothing groups, the middle and the bottom and top. And that makes the cylinder look kind of nice and neat. So one thing that I briefly mentioned that I think is also like super important you need to know about are the normals of 3D faces. So normal is basically the direction that a 3D face is facing to. That simple. It's like what direction do you think this face is facing? Well, obviously this way, right? Of course. This one is facing this way. Of course. This one is facing this way, and so on and so on. And you can actually see that by checking this box in or on here on your first sub-object mode. Just click Show Normals. There you go. It's showing you the normals of the two triangles. Remember, every quad is made up of two triangles. So this is actually showing you the normals of the two triangles. And yeah, it's pretty obvious that all these normals face the way, which the cylinder side is facing. Of course, it's kind of a obvious thing to think about once you see it. But these are the normals. So it's like, it's not like a tangible object, or it kind of is. It can be like a tangible thing. You can actually like, there are ways where you can actually select this line, which is the normal, and rotate it around to kind of like trick the rendering of the cylinder to do some weird shit. Like, for the most part, you never want to mess with the normals of an object. In fact, any technique that involves messing with the normals of an object, where you actually select the normals, is probably not the best idea. For some things, it works, but you guys should not even worry about that kind of stuff right now. I barely ever have messed with the normals of those objects, and believe me, if there were things that didn't require that, I would never mess with the normals. I would just leave them as they come by default. So of course, if I select some of these top faces, you can see all these normals facing up. And the moment I move some of these verts down, for example, if the moment I do this, well, of course, the normals of this triangle right here are no longer just facing up. It's kind of like, it's obvious really, but it's really important to know because of some of the, it's just a concept that you need to know, like normals are facing, it's the way the faces, it's what direction the faces are facing for the rendering of that face. And there's a really important reason why you guys should know about this, is because I'm gonna go back to the instance thing again. I'm gonna select the half of this cylinder, and I'm gonna delete it. So I'm back to the half, hollow half. I'm gonna shift drag a copy, make it an instance, and mirror it on the x-axis. Turn the snap on, and snap it back in place. So really pay attention to this right now. This is another thing that is extremely, extremely important, because as I was saying before, this instance technique, this symmetry thing, is something that you need to know and something that you will be doing over and over again when you make game assets or objects that mimic real life things. Like if you think of things like a bottle, or if you think of things like um, I don't know, like a shield, or even some swords, they are symmetrical. They are 100% symmetrical. So like this is something that you will do a lot. But anyway, back to what I was saying. So I'm back to this, right? But what happens once you're done and you want to turn this object into one object, right? Because you don't want to keep it like this forever. And in fact, if you take this two sides and export it into Unreal or ZBrush, well, ZBrush first of all is gonna like not like it in any way at all. It's just not gonna. You're just not gonna be able to do anything if you just take these two sides that are instanced into ZBrush to try to do something. It's just gonna like not even work. So what needs to happen is once you're done, let's say I'm sculpting a whole or modeling a whole thing. This is a face or something, and it's symmetrical, and I'm editing just one side, and I'm like, okay, I'm happy now with this face. I need to turn it into one object. Well, here's something that happens with instance objects that were mirrored. And this is something that you might not expect, but it kind of makes sense. So how do I turn this instance into an object that's independent again? So like basically like making it not an instance anymore so that these bold letters go away. Well, there's one way here that is called make unique. So like, I mean one way right here that is called make unique. So like right next to the trash can, you can see this make unique button. So if you hit that, well, now that it's a unique object again. Like if I move a vert, the other vert doesn't move anymore. Like I basically made this object back to a unique object again. That's the main way how you turn an instance back to like being a main object. I'm gonna undo that and it's back to an instance. Uh, there's another way, and I think it might be the more proper way maybe. And here I'm going to show you guys a totally new thing, and it's in the tabs up here in these like utility tabs. Go all the way to the last one that is like a hammer, which are actually the utilities. So select the utilities, and this is the default setup here. This is the same thing where you can add buttons to this. These utilities are, I mean, I guess utilities is the most straightforward way to describe these things. Sometimes there's like plugins and all kinds of crazy stuff that you can add here, like things that might be like tools. Like there's like Flight Studio here. I don't even know what that is, but it's probably like a plugin for like a flight simulator or something. I have no idea. I've never been impressed it. But the only one that I care about here, honestly, are two. It's reset expform and collapse. And this collapse has nothing to do with the previous collapse that I was talking to you guys about with verts and faces. This is actually like a collapse that'll collapse your stack of modifiers. Like this is what I mean by stack. Like the things that you add here over and over again, it kind of collapses all of that. So what reset expform does is it kind of resets your object to like a original raw state or something like that. That's the best way I can describe it. And like even if you did like check this out, like well first I'm gonna just press reset expform, and then this little option comes up and just say reset selected or reset selected. Boom. So I did it twice. So here you see like two expform things showed up in the stack. And then you can just go here and say collapse. and then collapse selected. Yeah, on the instance half, like do this on the instance half. So after I did that, this object has been totally reset. It's kind of like I've blanked it out back to like back to like its raw state. But now select the faces on that object and press Show Normals button. Oh, look at that. They're inverse, right? It's like this other half now has the normals going the opposite way. So think about that for a second. Like, because I mirrored this object, well, when I did that, the object itself has, like, it became totally inverted. But when it remains an instance and you don't collapse it, it still looks good. It still looks like the normals are facing where they should go. And if you hit render, it still looks like it's rendering correctly. So it's very deceiving. You might get tricked into thinking, oh, the other half is fine. It's going to render correctly. Well, no. Like resetting the X form and then collapsing the stack, you have to do that before you turn this object into one object again. But this is a problem, right? Because like, oh, well, now the other half is totally inverted. So actually like render this out. So like the render button is this little teapot here way at the end. So I'm just gonna hit render. And when I render it, look at that. It looks totally wrong. It looks like one half is fine, but the other half, what I'm seeing is the inside faces. And you don't want that. This is totally wrong. Like, of course it's wrong. Like, this is not, imagine like one half of your face looks outward and the other half looks like you're seeing through it. Like, you don't want that, right? So like, how do you fix that? Well, best way to fix it is like, once you reset it, the X form, and you collapsed it, you can select the faces, and here in Edit Mesh is right here in this Surface Properties section. So right after Edit Geometry, you keep going down, and then you reach this part where it says Surface Properties. And as you can see, there's a thing called Normals. It says Normals, Flip. Boom. You flip them, oh, back to normal. So basically, you just flip the normals, the direction of the normals, to get it back to a point where now the other half has fixed normals. There's a way to do this in Edit Poly 2. I'm going to show it in Edit Poly 2. So like in Edit Poly, I'm here, and I have those faces selected. And in Edit Poly, it's actually in a section called Edit Polygons. It's almost right after the main section right here, the Edit Poly mode. Edit Polygons, flip, boom. It's the same thing. And I want to show you guys on the two methods because you guys should just kind of like get used to knowing where things are, or even just knowing the name of the concept is good, because that way, if I had never used Edit Poly and I was like, how do I do it in Edit Poly? Well, I would kind of look for the flip thing. So to me, this is, oh, flip, okay. So if I keep pressing it, you can see how it just keeps flipping between the normals facing inside or outside. So that's great. That means that now, and the original object is fine. So like the original object never got mirrored. So the original object's normals never got inverted. They never got messed with because I never did anything to it. It's only the mirrored half that gets that flipped normals issue. So like if we were gonna do that thing where I wanted to do like each quadrant is an instance, it's actually like there's one that would be fine because I'm flipping it twice. See, like that's when it gets a little bit funny. It's like, oh, I'm mirroring it on the x-axis, well, that's going to flip the normals. But if I mirror it again on the y-axis, well, that would flip the normals again, right? But what does that mean? Well, it's going to get it back to normal because it got flipped twice. That's right. So like when you do the radial stuff, actually one side will be fine, but you still should reset the X form of an object. Resetting the X form of an object kind of cleans it of any kind of well, it cleans the stack and it cleans information out of it. It kind of makes it almost like a back to a primitive, really, but not really. It's kind of just makes it like back to like a very raw original state. But anyway, but then the other one, like if I flip it on the x-axis, well, it's gonna get flip normals. Then if I flip it on the y-axis, then the normals are back to normal because it's gotten flipped twice. But then if I mirror it again on the x-axis, well, that one will have flip normals because like it got flipped or mirrored 3 times. So like if I flipped it again the 4th time, I think actually that object is going to be fine. So I guess you guys can follow that logic. It's kind of fun. So anyway, now both of my cylinders have correct normals. So now I can put it back together and have a nice, clean, symmetrical object that I edited only on one side. And I guess like, bear with me, this is not the greatest example because I didn't do anything to the cylinder, but let's imagine I had moved some faces on this side and so on and so on. But anyway, how do you put it back together? Again, I'll show you how you do it in Edit Mesh and Edit Poly. So I'm back to Edit Mesh. Actually, very simple right here. In the Edit Geometry section, there's an Attach button. So like, if you press the Attach button, when you hover over a potentially attachable object, the cursor changes to like a crosser. See, like I'm here on the outside and I move it over here and then it's like a crosser. And if I click that object, boom, now it's attached. Now the 2 sides are back to being one object and it's pretty good. But that's not it yet. That's not it. But I'm gonna undo that because I want to show you in Edit Poly how you do it. So like in Edit Poly, hit Edit Poly, and again, you look for a similar name. You look for a similar logic. So here it is, Attach. Oh, sweet, same thing. And it works the same way. When you hover over a potentially attachable object, you just look for it and you press it, boom, now it's attached again. And now what I'm going to do is the exact same thing in Edit Poly and Edit Mesh. So I'll just keep going with Edit Poly. I know it's probably confusing to go back and forth. You guys are getting how I work. I tend to go back and forth. But definitely when you guys start exploring this on your own, just kind of look at all the options that are there. Just kind of experiment with stuff and see what kind of way you like the best. And I think most tutorials and most people at this point is more Edit Poly stuff. But I just like to show that the Edit Mesh thing sometimes is actually simpler and you can do things faster with it. But anyway, the two halves have been attached. But guess what? Like this thing is still loose. You know, like it's still not one thing. Well, how do you turn it into one thing? Pretty straightforward. You weld it together. Even the name is pretty obvious. You weld the vertices together. How do you do that? Well, you select the vertices that you want to weld, and in this case, see, like I'm going to wireframe mode here because, and I don't have ignore back facing on because I can just drag, select the inner, the middle part that I want to weld. I don't care about welding all these other ones because those are already welded, right? I only care about welding the ones here. So I select those I go back out of wireframe mode, and I'm gonna look for an option called weld. Oh, it's right here, right at the top, weld. So if I just press a button by default, it'll probably be fine. Uh, and why do I talk about default stuff here? Well, welding stuff has a distance threshold. So let's say you're working on an object and you kind of didn't do a great job at keeping it perfectly symmetrical, and then you put your other side near the vertices of the other side, but they're not like perfectly right on top of each other, but you still want to weld them. Well, the distance threshold, what that does, it kind of helps. It's like, oh, I'm going to weld the vertices that are around me, but I'm going to try to like reach out a little bit further. So that way, if they're very close together but not 100% there, you just increase the distance a little bit until it kind of reaches those verts that are around it. So then you kind of weld it together. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So, okay, so I welded the middle section together. I'm gonna press it again just to make sure, and boom. Now when I go to element mode and I select this object, it's all good to go. It's back to one full cylinder. That's awesome. That's and this was made out of like two actual symmetrical sides. So like if this had been a face, then both sides would be perfect. It would be welded right in the middle. Good to go. So I'm going to show you the example that I'm talking about here with the distance threshold. So here in the edit, and edit mesh has the same thing too. It's just options on the weld dialog. But here in edit poly, right next to it, you'll see this little box. So everything in edit poly, actually, or not everything, but a lot of options in edit poly, you'll see have this little box on the side. That little box, all it means is that function has more options. There you go. See, like it's that the threshold options that I'm talking about. So like the default is 0.1, which is a good default because why? Because it's saying, well, I'm gonna weld things that are at the most 0.1 unit far away. So that's a tiny number. That's like a really small amount. But like select all your verts, open the welding vert options, and just start increasing that number more and more. See, like at some point, I reached a distance that was like all those verts that were like maybe it looks like 4.7 units apart from each other get welded, and it just goes like pluck, like so now it's trying to weld too much stuff. It's the distance keeps going and going, so it starts to kind of like eat away more at the verts getting welded. So if I keep going even more and more and more and more, at some point it's just gonna do that. It's just gonna implode on itself, and I'm back to like two floating verts in space, like something you would never want to do. But that shows how the distance threshold acts in the weld vert stuff. I think like a good example would be I'm just gonna save this testing. Like maybe like I'm gonna see if any of the default max. Okay, here's like I'm just gonna open this dumb camper thing. This is like a default scene on the 3D Max scenes, and I guess this is actually not the greatest example. Well, fuck this thing. Let's go back to the test scene. I'm going to show you differently. I thought it was more high poly. It was like a pretty low poly camper. So like, I guess if I make a really, like you don't have to follow this along, just watch. Like here's a sphere, right? And I'm going to add like a Turbosmooth to it and make it like really, really super high poly. And then I'm gonna go to edit poly and select all the verts. And I'm gonna go to the weld dialog, and I'm gonna start to slide this thing up really slowly. Oh wow, like I think my thresholds are like tiny here, but if I keep going, see how like as you move slowly here, it starts to like eat away at more and more verts. Because the distances start to increase, so like it grabs more and more and more. So that's something that I rarely mess with welding verts. I try to keep it really, really low distance so that I'm only welding things like the seam in this cylinder. And that sometimes I go like super, super low threshold because you might be trying to weld something that is like really, really high poly, and you don't want to like melt any verts together. You want to just weld things that are exactly on top of each other. So you can actually go a threshold of 0.001 or something like that, something really, really small. And what that usually guarantees is that you won't accidentally collapse any verts that you might not want to lose detail or something like that. So like small numbers for the weld threshold are good. Edit poly has the same. Edit mesh has the same thing. So like if I select some verts and I look at these oh, these weld options, there it is. There's a number. This number right here. It sucks that it doesn't even say what it is, but that's what it is. This number is the threshold for the verts, and it actually has these like how many pixels, I guess. Like I've never used this number right here. I usually just worry about this number right here, the threshold of the distance. So anyway, that's a whole thing on how you put together meshes that had a symmetrical instanced half on the other side. It's not like you can't just make an instance half, mirror it, and then like weld it together. Actually, I'm going to show you what happens when you forget that step real quick, because this sometimes happens to even to me where I'm like where I kind of forget about it or something, where I kind of like space out and I don't flip the normals or something. Like it's still something you need to like keep in mind. So I'm gonna mirror it, I'm gonna weld it, I'm gonna snap it back together, I'm gonna reset the X form, reset selected, collapse, collapse selected. Now it's got the flipped faces, and I'm like, oh, okay. Well, in the viewport, it looks pretty cool, I guess. Like, there's nothing telling me that it's wrong. So I'm just gonna like attach it, and then select the birds and weld it. Oh, guess what? Look at this weird thing going on here. And then I'm gonna try to render it, and it's just totally wrong because like it actually tried to weld faces that were opposite normal direction, and look at how crazy, I'm sorry, how weird it tries to deal with that. It's just totally broken. That is something you should never ever do. That's something that is actually an error in a 3D model. It's not even something that you can like mess around with and try to do a cool thing with it. Maybe there is something kind of visually trippy or weird that you might want to achieve with this kind of thing. But honestly, anytime I've seen this, it's an error. It's like it doesn't look good. It'll create weird things with your rendering. It'll look bad in the game engine. Like welding a face that is facing this way to this one, it's just not right. This is an error right here. This is not something that should ever really happen in your 3D model at all, like at all. So remember always, but actually like the way to fix this, like let's say you totally messed it up and you're like, oh shit, well I did this. Actually, you can kind of fix it. You select all the faces on the other side, the ones that are wrong, and even after it's been welded, if you flip it, it's fine. Like that that's a way to fix it. I wouldn't recommend fixing it like that after you welded it, always flip the normals before you weld. That's a cleaner way to do things. Because why is that cleaner? Well, what if your object was super high poly and just had like a ton of stuff? Well, you might spend more time selecting the faces again and then flipping them than just like flipping the whole thing before it's part of the object that you've created. But anyway, I think I might actually stop right here because even though we haven't even reached the fun part, I think you guys should really practice these concepts. Like uh, really try to like understand, or like maybe watch the video again or something, um, because the next video, like I think we can do it tomorrow. I think we can again tomorrow around 8 or something. Um, we'll try to now get into the axe, but I wanted this first video to be like an introductory concept thing. And I've actually just hit, like, everything that I've talked about in this video is 100% focused on what we're gonna do with the axe. Like, I'm not talking about anything else that I'm not gonna use when we make the axe. It's all about the axe. So, but honestly, like, also all of these concepts are not just for making an axe. Um, I, Even though I could actually make a tutorial that is just for making that axe, well, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make the axe, but also like hit every single thing that has to do with making objects in 3D for games. That's another thing. This is for games. I'm not going over high-risk stuff that we might not need right now. But yeah, like uh, rewatch the video and like maybe take notes. Take notes of the things that I talk about that I think are the really important things, the essential things. In fact, everything that I've talked about here are things that you really, really have to grasp. You really have to like keep in mind. So definitely mess around with instances, with normals, with snapping things together, with creating primitives and messing with them. Just play around with the primitives. Look at all the options that exist for creating primitives. Um, yeah, I think this was a lot already. So I hope you guys can see the value of all this stuff. Like definitely. Just there's something that Jason, the lead programmer at our company, always says is like you have to do a thing over and over and over and over again. It's like he has a story about this programming book that the first chapter was literally like the guy wrote like, oh well, do this, and then step 2, do it again. Step 3, actually do it again. It was like I guess the point was that in some of these things, you just don't do it once and you're like, oh, okay, I guess I learned. Well, no, you have to like do it over and over again until you can do it like in your sleep. So all the things that I talked about in this video, try to like really, really understand them so that tomorrow when we get into the more fun part of doing the acts, you guys are going to be already like a lot of these things are going to be already like, oh yeah, I know exactly what that is. So yeah, guys, like thanks for watching and sticking around, and definitely practice this a lot. And I'll get back on it tomorrow. I think 8 is good for me. I'm gonna be doing something tomorrow. I have to get home until like 8, so like 8, that's good. Let's do that. All right, so yeah, I'm gonna stop it right there. So have a good night, guys.